Hey guys, welcome back. My guest today is Justin Eastzer. He's the host of Diabetech, the Diabetech podcast, and Diabetech YouTube channel. You've definitely seen his TikToks, you've definitely seen his YouTube videos, and he and I had a great conversation on the Diabetech podcast just earlier this week. So you can go check out my interview, and this is part 2 of our collaboration. And part 3 is really exciting. We're going to be doing a meetup at ADA in Orlando on Saturday, June 22nd. So if you are in the area of Orlando, be on the lookout for us to announce more details about that event Saturday, June 22nd at 7 p.m. Justin's interview is part of our ongoing coverage for Pride Month, which is June. And to celebrate Pride in the diabetes community, we're highlighting amazing stories from the LGBTQ plus diabetes community to show that diabetes doesn't have to stop you from being who you are and living your best life. Please be welcoming and respectful to our guests, and if you feel the need to be bigoted, hateful, or discriminatory, we will protect our guests and respond in kind. And this even applies to Justin, who's a large creator in this space, who earlier this week posted a very simple Pride celebratory message, and there were hateful and bigoted comments in his post. So please respect each other and listen to these stories. You may just learn something and be inspired. Now let's get to the interview. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Diabetic Doing Things. We're telling the amazing stories of people with diabetes from all over the world. Very special guest for you guys today. If you have been involved in diabetes social media community in the past 3 or 4 years, you are no doubt familiar with my guest. Justin, welcome to the show. You know him as the host of Diabetech and the Diabetech YouTube channel and podcast. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It was great to have you on my show a couple days ago, and I'm loving this collaboration, so this will be fun.
Me too. I think when you meet other podcasters and you meet other creators, I love the opportunity to do the collab and the synchronicity and just saying yes to things and finding that, momentum. This is now, I think, the third time I've done this sort of similar same week podcast. So just excited to keep things going. And I want to focus because your diagnosis story is fairly unique in the modern age. And I've loved hearing you share it on other episodes over the years. So why don't you tell us how you became a part of the T1D community? Because originally there was some misdiagnosis associated.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed officially with type 1 diabetes 3 years ago. So at first, I was misdiagnosed as type 2. And I was given metformin. That wasn't working. I was feeling terrible. I had all the symptoms that, you hear: thirsty all the time, blurred vision, mood swings, peeing all the time. And I also lost a ton of weight, at least 20 pounds. And it wasn't until I had some friends tell me, you look really skinny, that I really, and they were like, no, you look sick skinny, that I was like, okay, this is an issue. So I went to another doctor. This other doctor put me on long-acting insulin, had me testing blood sugar, still that type 2 diagnosis. And I just started posting videos on TikTok because I thought what I was doing, it was so new to me. I thought it was cool. And I was like, let me share this with people and show them what I'm doing. So I just started posting videos of me testing my blood sugar, showing my blood sugar is 350. Is that high? Taking long-acting insulin for the first time. And these videos pretty quickly just blew up. The type 1 community found them. They told me, Justin, you have type 1 diabetes. You need to get screened. You need the C-peptide test. You need to get an endocrinologist, a pump, a CGM, all this overload of information, which felt like a lot too. I mean, I was already feeling so ill. Getting all of these to-dos, it was a lot, but I took their advice and I got an endocrinologist, got the C-peptide test, and after 6 months of being misdiagnosed as type 2, I got my diagnosis of type 1. And that really happened because of all this feedback on TikTok. And it just shows the true power of these social media apps. We hear so much bad, and there is bad on these platforms, but there's also so much community. And I just landed in one that found my content and saved me and has helped me get on track. And that's kind of why I do what I do today. I decided that as I was learning all of this, there's an overload of information that you're given at early diagnosis, like, oh, you're going to have to start carb counting, measuring out insulin. This is what a low is. This is what a high is. Like this, there's so much to learn. And I realized, a lot of people can't afford this information. They don't have health insurance. They don't see a diabetes educator. So why don't I just take the information I receive and make a 60-second video on TikTok about it? And so I just started doing that, and it resonated with people. And so that's why I just continue to create it.
Yeah, and I'm a fan of your content and a fan of your channel, and I think you do such a great job. And we're going to talk a little bit about your background as well, kind of prior to diabetes. But I want to focus because, like you said, there are a lot of sort of negative headlines that come out about social media and about how much content we're consuming, how much time we're spending on devices. In our episode, we talk about the power of community, and I share, I agree very much with you about whatever your story is, sharing it is, the first step that you need to take to see what sort of world can open itself up for you. Because if you don't share those videos, maybe it's years before you realize, or something harmful could have happened to you before you realize that you were misdiagnosed. But also, like, when you're hearing that feedback, especially from strangers, sometimes it feels like a little bit overwhelming. So what were you going through as those comments and messages started to come in about, hey, Justin, I think you maybe don't have the right diagnosis, or maybe you don't have all the information that you need? Well, how did you feel when those messages started coming in?
I felt very alone. And also, this was at a time, this was during COVID. So we were all feeling a bit isolated, but having all of these symptoms, feeling like my body wasn't functioning at the age of 30 years old when I was working out, I was eating pretty well. Like, I was doing all of the things I needed to do, I thought, to have a healthy body and lifestyle. And I just wasn't okay. So I felt very alone. So when I received all of this feedback from people, all of these comments and support, it really was just that. It felt like I had this entire team of people behind me that cared about what I was going through and understood what I was going through, and also normalized what I was going through, because it felt also new to me. It felt like I was dying. Like, I was like, something is not okay. And having all of these responses tell me, no, you're okay, you just need the right treatment, made me feel like I could tackle this and I could do this. And that's why I also kept going back to social media, not just to help people, but also to ask questions to help me. And I was like, wow, we can crowdsource information here. That's what's so powerful about these platforms, is that I can share something, you can share something with me, and we can learn about something together. So, they were helping me just as much as I was helping them. And you saw these repeat characters. Everyone's just, I think we talked about this on my episode. You see just like these photos of people, like, they're real people, like and you see months later, the same people will be like, oh, like, you're doing great. I was there, in the very beginning. I'm so happy to see where you're at. And it's always so great to, like, especially when you meet these people in person at like a convention or something, like, these are real people. They're awesome. They're just, it's just so, it's so easy to just, I don't even know what I'm saying, but you know what do you understand what I'm saying?
Do. Can I attempt to translate a little bit? Because I know exactly what you're saying, and I've experienced it, because I think the first time I met internet friend, so for me at the beginning of 2018, so, over 6 years ago at this point, my local JDRF chapter allowed me to bring some of my first internet friend to a social media panel at a JDRF Type 1 Nation conference. And I remember being so nervous to meet those people in person, because I had talked to them online and I had messaged them. But, like, there is a little bit of a difference between having an internet conversation with someone and meeting them in person. And that first dinner, they all sort of like were coming in from the airport, like one after the other after the other. And I just remember we got to skip all of the explanation of who we were and how we managed our diabetes and like what even diabetes is and like why are you pulling out a glucometer at the dinner table. And that type of interaction, like if I could bottle that up and just give it to everybody with diabetes, that feeling of connecting with someone really for the first time in person is it's second to none. So yeah, I'm glad that you've gotten to experience that. But like, if you hadn't had shared your story and shared that journey and continued to come back, that would be a missing piece for both of us.
Yeah, I'm really glad that I found this community and have people to talk to about anything that I'm going through. And I feel honored to be someone that others can look at and feel less alone and feel supported, and also come to me and DM me with their questions, their insecurities, their anxieties. And even if I can't necessarily solve what that is, I can let them know that I feel the same thing or I've gone through the same thing. And I think
Right.
that's what's most important.
That normalizing, right? Like getting back to like, oh yeah, I've experienced this too. You're not the only one going through it. And I think especially like you said, during the pandemic, especially the early pandemic years, like we were all very isolated, all very online and like looking for that connection. So I'm glad that you found it. I found you. I'll say I think I had seen maybe a couple of videos, but the one that really resonated with me the first time was one of your diabetic mom sketches where you put the wig on and you do the big New York accent. So, like, obviously, your tech content and you as a tech reviewer and the Diabetech show is great, and I love your perspective. But getting outside of that a little bit, and like being a little bit silly and a little bit zany, like talk about like where did that come from? That was I love those videos.
Yeah, so my inspiration for that character is from a guy named John Roberts. He's the voice of Linda on Bob's Burgers. Years ago, he had a YouTube channel. He was like one of the first YouTubers, like one of the first big ones, at least in my local area, where he did this impersonation of a Long Island mother. I'm from Long Island. I grew up with the same people surrounding me that, say, if it says diabetes, it's supplies, it's got to come down. Like that is how these people talk. And it feels like home. So his sketches, I was always a huge fan of his sketches. And I think it was like 5 years ago that I dressed up as that character for Halloween, and I made a whole video, and it was just so much fun. And I had this idea to recreate that character, but as like a mother of children with diabetes. So, there's so many different situations I've put her in, whether it's her children having a high and needing to go out on a walk, going to the pharmacy, all very relatable things, but through the eyes of her child looking at her and what she's doing, the outrageous things she does. She's just so much fun. And my favorite accent to do is just a Long Island accent. Both my parents have a pretty strong accent like that. And it's just been such a great time. I haven't done one of those videos in a minute, and I owe everyone like a bunch. I really need to make it a routine thing. It was for a second and then I stopped, and I really need to get back into it because she's just her and her purple velour outfit and her jumpsuit and her big wig and
Yeah,
sunglasses. And John
if there
Roberts
are
followed me. He found my videos and he now follows me on
look at
Instagram.
that. See,
Yeah.
you find the right content, right? And you find that community. I will say if that video has no fans, I am dead because I'm a huge fan of those videos. The velour jumpsuit, everything top to bottom, really top notch. I also want to talk to you. So June is Pride Month, and you are active in the LGBT community, and I'd love to talk about. You and I mentioned on our podcast on your show that you've done some content about dating and diabetes, and it was really popular. And that's also I get a lot of questions, especially from like parents or young people about how to be open about your diabetes in romantic situations. So I'd love to talk to you about dating in the community and your experience with talking about diabetes in your dating life.
Yeah. So I think very lucky to have been diagnosed later in life at 30 because I was able to build up my confidence and self-love up to that point to a point where now having diabetes and wearing the technology, I don't think it phases me as much as it may have if I was diagnosed a lot earlier. I don't care what people think about, especially something like diabetes, something that's out of my hands, especially also like even just being gay and coming out as that, something I also didn't choose, but also am very happy. I'm happy to be gay and I wouldn't give it back for anything. I think that has all allowed me to have the confidence level that I have today. And I try to spread that on social media too, and let people know, like, if anyone gives you anything or acts weird about it, then they're just not a good person. They're not the right person for you. And it's not a reflection on you. It's a reflection on them. So, I always try to have fun with it. There's so many different situations that you'll come into, whether it's dating, sex, meeting people for the first time, going out dancing, all these different scenarios that you'll need to navigate and that I've had to learn how to navigate, but I just have fun with it. If I meet someone and I'm sure you have some questions, but like one example is like, if I meet someone on a dance floor and I just start dancing with them and, if we're like, I don't know, if we're like touching each other in some way, like I'll sometimes grab their hand and put it on my insulin pump and be like, that's an insulin pump. And then I'll take their hand and put it on my CGM and be like, and that's a CGM. And I'll even say like a little, and I'll
right
say
there, 1 to
right,
1.
literally. And there's a couple, another thing I'll do is like, sometimes if I'm like being sexual with someone, and I often find that most often people aren't weirded out by the tech. They're worried that they're going to hurt you or rip it off, but more so hurt you. So I try to show them with my Omnipod. I like lick it, I hit it, and I like slap it. I'm like, it's fine. This doesn't hurt. Like, just so you know. So I try to get ahead of all of their worries or anxieties about the technology so that they're not in their head and so that I'm not in my head about them being in their head.
I love that. Because I think it really does stem from a place of curiosity, right? And in those intimate moments, like, they're very vulnerable for everyone. Being intimate with someone is a very vulnerable thing. And, it even comes back to like my experience, and even in my marriage with my wife, like if she pulls on my pump tubing and my site, she feels my site pull, she feels like it caused me a ton of pain. And like most of the time it doesn't. Even if a site gets all the way ripped out, it's not the end of the world, right? And people, I think, are just trying to be courteous and try to understand. And, like you said, if they're not that way, and this is something I've said to people in the past who have asked about, or in these similar types of conversations about how to be open. And I think especially young women really, and women in general, deal with a lot of judgment about, their bodies from other people. But it really is a great filter for a good person, somebody who is like just curious, or, if they are, overly judgmental about your diabetes or about your devices, you might have just saved yourself a lot of time by, before you found out something else about this person, organically. But it is a really interesting, like, it's mostly curiosity. And like you said, you got to touch it, introduce them to it. And that's diabetes awareness. Now they've experienced an insulin pump and a CGM. Now they know a little bit more about life with diabetes.
Exactly.
So for you, like, if you were going to encourage someone who has had diabetes a while, maybe was diagnosed when they were younger, it feels like they're like, man, I really wish I could be proud of my devices, or proud, and wear an outfit that maybe displays them or shows them, or be comfortable talking to a stranger about them. How would you encourage them to kind of adopt your mindset there?
Yeah, I think it's an exciting moment when you get to share how cool this technology is. I mean, my whole brand it's Diabetech. It's all about the technology. I have so much fun explaining how all of these work and doing it in a fun way. And I think that if you approach it like that and make it less of like this like medical terminology and just like be like kind of very layman, explain to people how all the devices work. I think that that's just going to make people more aware of it in general. And I think one thing I love about teaching others about all of the gear is that when they then see it out in life again, a few things can happen. I mean, so I've had friends that tell me, "Oh, I saw someone wear a Dexcom," and I went up to them and I was like, "Oh my God, I see your Dexcom. Like my friend has type 1 and they have a channel you should watch, whatever." I think that the more we educate, the more awareness we build, the better, the less awkward moments there may be for people, and the better off we make it for people who don't feel comfortable about talking about it. And it's totally okay to not want to talk about it. It doesn't need, that's another thing when it comes to dating and meeting new people. Oftentimes for me, a point of conversation winds up becoming type 1 diabetes, what it is, because it's my career. And oftentimes one of the first 6, 7 questions that someone asks you is, what do you do? And I'm kind of like over answering that question a little bit because I have to explain my whole, like, I feel like in order for me to explain what I do, I need to say like my diagnosis a little bit as to how I got into it. So I enjoy telling that story and explaining all of it to people, but it does get old a little bit. And especially when like I go on a date and, you're going to talk about what you do, like it becomes this whole long conversation. And I will say, people do see the passion I have, and passion's a turn on, right? Being able to educate people about something is also a turn on, I think. When someone wants to, take you through a whole story and the mechanics behind something. So I do it. But there are moments where I'm starting to be like, I just met this person. I'm telling them all this stuff. It's like, why does the conversation need to, always be type 1 diabetes?
I'm glad you brought that up because I obviously similarly have conversations with people, not in a dating way necessarily anymore, but meeting new people, networking, sharing your story. What do you do? Or, talking about podcasting or social media or whatever the case may be. And I also get that feeling of, because your story to yourself seems old and like, oh, like nobody wants to hear this. You're like, oh, here we go. We're gonna hit all the beats. I was diagnosed here and this is what I did. And we got the podcast, we're doing all this stuff. Do you ever find yourself opting out of that? Because I have found in some cases, I try to just to make it easier on myself. So most of the time it's just interactions with strangers where I don't dig into the whole thing. I'm trying to move past it. Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, I try. It depends on how long I'm going to be with this person, right? So if like we're going out for the night, I think it's okay to like tell them a little bit of the story because we're getting to know each other. If
Sure.
it's a passerby or I'm at a house party and I'm leaving soon, I don't want to get into all of it. I'd rather the conversation be about something else than me and my whole career and my chronic illness.
Your deepest, darkest secrets about your diabetes, right?
So I try to filter out who I'm, going into the whole discussion with. And yeah, just because I just don't need to take up the whole conversation of this person I just met. I don't need to tell them my whole life story. And sometimes I'll just say, yeah, I create content. I say like I'm a tech content creator, and I kind of just leave it at that. Because I also, before diabetes, I was doing all content creation on technology. So, and I still consider myself that.
I agree. And I think like when I think of the simple way to describe it's like, oh, Justin Diabetech is the diabetes tech reviewer. And, most people I think who are familiar with YouTube channels and things like that understand, a tech reviewer and what that looks like. I sort of love this. shift in the conversation because I wasn't necessarily sure how to bring that up of like, prior to your diagnosis, you did have experience in content creating and that was your career at production and reviewing technology, which is a passion for you. So like going through that diagnosis experience and learning about the technology, you talked about passion and how that connects people. I really believe that that's a huge part of why so many people love your channel is because you are passionate about technology and teaching other people about it. And you throw diabetes in there, it becomes even more personal and more tangible. So for you, as you started to discover this technology, did that kind of inform you like, oh, I can continue to do what I'm trained to do and what my career has been, but just with a new lens?
Yeah, absolutely. So my whole career has been in content creation in some form. I started in LA at a trailer house where we made TV spots and trailers. I was a PA, assistant editor. Then I moved into TV development, Spotify, America's Got Talent, not America, America's Got Talent. Yeah. So I've always loved story producing, video editing, storytelling, content. And then I went into tech content creation. When I was diagnosed, that or before I was diagnosed, me putting all those videos on TikTok just felt very natural already to want to show people something cool, techie-ish. I mean, a glucometer was techie to me. It was so new to me that I was like, check out this cool device. I put a drop of blood on it and it tells me my blood glucose. How cool is that? So as soon as I found that these videos were resonating with people, that I was learning and they were learning, it felt only natural to continue doing what I was already doing, reviewing technology, explaining how it works, but kind of do it in this other area. At the same time, Diabetech for the longest time, maybe it was 2.5 years, was a hobby of mine. I was just throwing videos whenever I had a chance, putting them up about a new piece of tech or an experience I had, a bad low, something I learned about carb counting, a new app I was using to carb count. And I was doing that on the side while I was still doing my Justin Tech YouTube channel, which was all about smart home, VR and AR, wearables. And now it's been a bit of a reverse. I'm more so focused on Diabetech. And Justin Tech is a little side project that occasionally when I have a new piece of technology, I'll throw up a video. And, something I realized, Justin Tech grew to a large, to a fair amount of people, 35,000 subscribers on YouTube. But Diabetech's been growing a lot faster. And I realized a while ago now that the reason for that is community. With Justin Tech, I was pulling at so many pieces of technology. I didn't have a niche. I was having fun. I wanted to be a YouTuber and create all this content, but there was really no mission or goal with it. It was just to create cool content and hopefully something sticks. With Diabetech, I've been able to harness this community that exists, bring them in, and create my own microcosm community of Diabetechies. And that's why Diabetech continues to grow at a strong pace, because the passion is obvious. One thing I've realized with Diabetech is that I can just keep talking and talking about all of the tech. Whereas because I've become a professional or a pro, or so, like, I just learned so much, I can speak to a lot. That's why I love my podcast, is because I can bring people on to answer questions and then I know the answers. Whereas Justin Tech, I felt like I was like, oh, there's a new iPhone. Like, what are the specs? Like, I don't care what the resolution of an iPhone is anymore. I mean, I do, but like, I don't care to be the one telling you, because it's kind of surface level to me now.
I find too that using myself as the filter and trying to say, oh, I'm genuinely curious about this. I have this great guest or this expert who's going to come on and talk, or this amazing story that we get to be a part of, and kind of put myself in the listeners and say, hey, we can all learn along this together. And I think when you're talking about that community aspect, it's we care so much more about this than the resolution of an iPhone or, some new feature in the next iOS that all the other, tech, reviewers are focusing on, because these little updates, these little, collaborations, these, recently on the podcast this week, we talked about companies collaborating for a bihormonal insulin pump. Like, these things are going to make huge differences in people's lives like us. And while it is a smaller group, there's, 1.5 million people in the US with type 1 diabetes. And even the type 2 diabetes population is much smaller than the general population people who use iPhones. But all these things make a huge difference. So it's a smaller amount of people, but it's a bigger impact. And I think connecting with those people is so important and is added so much to my life. And I also learned, and I think we shared on the podcast, but like, people who are connected to other people with diabetes, either via blogs and social media, not even in person, have better clinical outcomes 100% of the time. So like, just listening to a diabetes podcast, watching a diabetes video, creating a diabetes video or post literally makes you healthier than if you didn't do that. So I think that's an extremely exciting part of the benefit of our community compared to, a more generic like tech platform.
Yeah, my favorite comment that I get on my videos is that I didn't know there were so many choices or options. My doctor has never told me about any of this. So the fact that I can create content that people then feel like they have options and can do better or be happier, that just feels amazing.
Well, I think it comes back to, and we could talk about this in the community as well, because I think it's important during Pride Month to talk about the power of community, but also, when you're in a community and there's something like diabetes as the filter, diabetes does not discriminate. There's a lot of different kinds of people within that community. And, I think from my perspective, the most important part of being a good community member is being a kind human and being willing to listen and accept other experiences that are very different than your own. And, being an ally and making sure to call out when, people are either saying the wrong things or have perspectives that are damaging or misinformed or, are bad actors or, and hate speech. And we've experienced a lot of that in the community over the years. So, for you, coming into the community and experiencing, these folks, like, how can, somebody who is not a part of the LGBT community be an ally to other, community members with diabetes?
Yeah, I think I lightly touched on this earlier, but that's why I try to explain how the technology works to people who are very curious or include it in my story when I explain it, because I want allies, people who don't have diabetes, who have never even experienced or know anyone with it, to understand how all of the technology works. If I'm having a low, I will, because you have low brain and it's kind of uncomfortable. I'll sometimes have to tell someone in the situation, depends on the situation, that I'm having that low. I also want people to be that support for other people they may encounter who are also having a low. If someone passes out, know what to do. You do not give them insulin, because a lot of entertainment movies in the past have created misinformation there that people need insulin at that time. So sometimes I'll casually throw that into conversation of, like, if I'm on vacation with a group of people, I'll be like, yeah, and like if I went low, like, you'd give me like orange juice, or like if there was icing somehow, you put some icing in, any type of sugar that will kind of just like soak in whatever if I'm, passed out. So I think that what people can do, allies, is they don't need to outwardly tell people that I'm here for your diabetes, but just if you know someone in your presence has diabetes, just be a support for them. Be aware. You don't need to babysit them, but if you notice something's off, I don't love when people ask me how my sugar is when I'm like looking at my watch or my phone, because I'll find that happens, which is kind of like a drawback to like me explaining everything to people. Is like, when I look at my watch, someone's like, hey, is your sugar okay? I'm like, I don't need you asking me that.
Yeah.
But I understand why they're asking. So I think that that's another aspect to the whole, how can you be supportive? I think you can be supportive but through actions less than words. I don't think you need to ask someone how their sugar is. But if you want to have some M&Ms in your bag for someone that, has diabetes, sure. But I don't think you need to outwardly tell them. Because, yeah, sometimes for me, I get a little annoyed. I can't help it. I understand where their heart is. But when someone asks me how my sugar is, when I'm like looking at one of my devices.
I love that you're saying that, because there are so many videos online of you explaining diabetes technology and talking about diabetes in general. And you still feel defensive or feel encroached upon sometimes when people ask you about, what you're doing or how your sugars are. I'm the same way. I've told the story a lot. One of the first times somebody who was just a teammate of mine in college just asked a really simple, kind of curious question about my glucometer and an insulin pen. And I went off on him like worse than any that I've ever really like gone off on anyone about anything. And I, later explained and apologized, and I realized that like that's a really personal question sometimes. And, sometimes we don't have the tools or the words or the experience to let other people know how that feels. So I think it's super important to talk like, someone who's so outward about their diabetes and who, it's their career and they, they lead with it. And the name of their channel and the filter by which they create it's still a very personal thing. And so it's okay if someone asks you about your sugars and you feel defensive about it.
Yeah, going back to the whole like living my gay lifestyle, there is things aren't perfect. I know like we all make like my sugars are great, but I'm still constantly going through the struggle of having diabetes, going out and just wanting to have fun and have drinks and whatever else may come my way. And there being a part of me that's worried that what could happen. I don't think since diagnosis, I haven't fully let go the way I could before. And so that's something that's been hard being diagnosed later in life, going to music festivals, going on vacations, running around, doing what other people do, eating whatever I want, substances. And now I'm on edge with all of that. And while I have moments where I can be free and can feel free, there's always going to be that diabetes nagging you a little bit behind you. And I do my best. I found ways to cope, taking my smartwatch off, listening to my body. And I think that people who have had diabetes their whole life, they may be a little better off in that sense. It's something you've always dealt with. You don't know life outside of that. And you probably aren't as on edge as I am. So,
Well,
yeah.
and I think, 4 years seems like a long time sometimes, right? But it's also a very short time. And you talked about something like you can still have freedom and you can still do things that make you happy, but there is that loss of like the carefree side. You're talking about like a music festival where I saw a story online the other day of someone who in a scrum at a music festival, their pump got pulled off and they lost it. And like the amount of anxiety, like I just felt it in my bones, like how terrifying that would be for that person, because it's not something that you can just, pull a replacement out of or you carry on you most of the time. And it's not just like a phone where you can go buy a new one so quickly and be, back to what you're doing. And this person was looking for long-acting insulin to help them, manage their sugars while they got a new pump. And, I think that's what really you're talking about is like you can go experience these things. I encourage people to do so, if that's what you want and make a plan. But there's always that kind of in the back of your mind, real danger that kind of prevents you from living carefree.
Yeah. I think something that hits me is, and it hit me recently. It feels very fresh. I must have been out at like a Sunday fun day rooftop party, and I'm just looking around and I see, everyone has their struggles too. So but I was just so internalizing that I was having some sort of diabetes moment, maybe a low blood sugar that happened a couple times, and I just looked around and everyone just seemed like they were running around, carefree. And it just hit me that I feel like I'm not able to do that the way I used to want to do that. I'm still having a lot of fun, and I encourage everyone to do all of this stuff. Go to music festivals, be prepared. I brought a bunch of extra stuff, and I dropped it off at the medical tent when I went to Coachella. So do what you can there. But sometimes no matter how prepared you are, you're not prepared for the one thing that's never happened before and just happened.
Right. That's really well said. I love that you brought it to the medical tent, because then you have to worry about losing it, right? You're able to check it in, and that those resources even exist. I wouldn't have even thought of that. So I learned something new today.
Oh, I become best friends with the medical tent. So for the 3 days of Coachella, it was the same people there every day. And I was arriving like in my crop top, my like short shorts, like hopping in, like, hey everyone, like, okay, so this is my pump. This needs to be refrigerated, please. Thank you. Okay, I'll see you guys later. Okay, awesome. And then there were moments where like maybe a pod ripped off. I had to go get one, and I was like, oh, hey, what's up? Oh, showing them what I'm doing, like having a lot of fun with it, making it less of like a weakness and more of like this exciting strength.
I think there's a lot that we can learn from that. I love that approach, and that is like making diabetes again like your superpower, and leaning into it in a way that brings positive awareness. It's like, oh, look at this guy, he's having a great time, and he's being proactive about his management, and we're able to help him. I do want to shift a little bit back to technology, because as we are kind of coming towards the end of our time today, what gets you the most excited? Like, you have so much passion about technology in general and about diabetes technology. You've got some amazing content that you posted recently about sort of the history of diabetes technology. But when you think about the future, we're about to go to ADA, and we're going to do a little plug for what we'll be doing there at the end. But what gets you the most excited about diabetes technology, like where we are today and where we're going?
So I think what gets me most exciting, and I know you asked for technology, but like I think at the root of it, insulin is an amazing technology, and there's a lot of innovations going on there. Theoretically, an insulin could remove the need for all technology, and just having like a shot a week, a shot a day could potentially manage diabetes. And the idea of that sounds amazing. So that there is one insulin specifically that could do this, and it's smart. It's a smart insulin. And the way something like this works is you'd take the insulin, you could take like a bunch of insulin, whatever, put it in your system, but it won't activate until it's needed. That's where the smart comes into play. So whenever it senses that there's too much glucose in your bloodstream, it's activated, and whatever insulin isn't used just goes away. It just leaves your system. So I would love that at the root of it. Just give me some smart insulin, and I don't have to wear anything on my body. I'm fine. There's also some other innovations where they found the potential to speed up insulin. So there is a snail, a marine snail. There's a bunch of them. I have a video coming out soon on social that goes into detail. It also has video of this snail. So there is a snail that, in order to catch its prey, it releases insulin to give the prey a hypo. So it passes out and eats it. So there are studies,
but incredible,
right? So there are studies right now looking at these marine snails and the insulin they produce, mainly because of how quickly the insulin activates. So in this case, this would just mean a faster insulin. Right now, the way we're delivering insulin, it's a pretty slow process. It can sit in the skin and fat tissue for a bit of time. Doesn't activate very quickly. There's, 20-ish minutes until it actually starts doing something. And then it can also get stuck. So it doesn't leave your system quickly enough. It can take like 4 hours plus to leave your system. So faster insulin would be amazing. One piece of technology that I'm very excited to see is the new twist pump, 2 eyes, coming from Sequel MedTech. This company was founded by Dean Kamen. Dean Kamen invented the first wearable insulin pump called the auto syringe. I get into this on my journey to an artificial pancreas video where I get into like the history. So basically, this new pump is like the sequel. That's why the company's called Sequel MedTech. And it is a small round disc, holds 300 units of insulin. But what's most exciting is it's powered by Tidepool Loop, which is an algorithm that comes from the open source space from DIY Loop. So it allows for iPhone control, smartwatch control with the Apple Watch, pre-meal target that starts lowering your glucose levels before you eat, the lowest target range of 87 milligrams per deciliter, some great stuff. So I'm very excited to see that come out. It's supposed to come out this year. And with that, what I'm most excited for and hopeful for is I hope that all of these companies, and I think they will in time, will bring smartwatch control to insulin pumps. That the DIY, all the open source apps allow this. You can bolus and log carbs on an Apple Watch, and the Twist pump's going to have that. I could see Tandem, Medtronic, and Omnipod also bringing that, especially since all of them are either have or are moving to iPhone control. The Apple Watch, it just connects to the phone. It just acts as a remote. So it's not that far-fetched, and I think that that's going to be one of the next steps for them, especially if a pump's coming out with smartwatch control. Like you gotta compete.
Yeah, and I think, when we hear about, in the industry talking about competition breeds innovation, I think that's what they're talking about, and that fast tracks. We've seen in the past 5 years, the more hybrid closed loop systems are approved, the more come to market, the algorithms get more advanced, the targets get lower, and as a result, the outcomes for patients get better. I'll go ahead and link in the show notes your interview about this and your videos about the Sequel pump, so that our listeners can catch up on that if they haven't already. But Justin, as we're kind of coming towards the end here, I think we have an exciting announcement that we can make on this podcast, and we'll be promoting obviously shortly after this episode airs and probably before. But we're going to do a collaborative meetup. Diabetech's Doing Things, working title. We haven't quite got there yet, but we're going to be doing a meetup in Orlando because we're both going to be there. And we're going to be doing that Saturday night at 7 p.m. And so that location will be TBD, but Florida diabetes community, we're going to take advantage of being in the same place during a conference. And while not everybody will get to go to the conference floor, we can bring at least some of the people out and about to go have some fun in Orlando and meet other people with diabetes. So excited to see you again. We got to link up at ATTD in Italy, which was exciting. And it was great to meet you. But, when you get to meet your internet friends IRL, that's where the real magic happens. So excited to work on that with you.
Yeah, it will be great to get everyone together. I'm going to go talk to all of my creator friends also and make sure they come. Maybe we can, spark some future collaborations. And I guess for people wondering about the location, it's not locked yet, but we will update on like social media. Is there any other way that we can let everyone know?
Are you throwing me a lob for something? I'm missing it out.
No,
I think
do you have like a newsletter?
Email? Yeah,
I'm working on my newsletter. I don't have one yet.
It'll definitely go out in the drip from Diabetics Doing Things. So if you
Okay.
subscribe to that, you will get that. And we have some local diabetes friends that I've known over the years from Orlando that are going to help us spread the word. So we're going to do our best to get it out there, but definitely social media, email, newsletter, we'll get that going.
Yeah, and even like you said, I'm happy like on my podcast, even if it's just 10 people, I'm just happy to be in a room with a bunch of people who want to talk about anything, who happen to have diabetes and create content, whatever, or consume it.
Absolutely. Well, Justin, thank you so much for your time today and for all that you're doing for people with diabetes. And, again, I think I told you this when we met in Italy. When I started creating content about diabetes in 2015 and 2016, people welcomed me to the community and, made me really feel like I was part of something. And I made a decision then to try to do that for others. And so I'm just so excited that you are here and you're creating content and you're building community and you're pushing things forward for people with diabetes. So I know that takes a lot of time, effort, and energy. And I know now it is your career. And so, thank you for choosing that and opting in and leaning into that for people with diabetes. I know it makes a huge difference.
Of course, I'm happy to be here. I'm here to stay, and I've got a lot more coming. Happy Pride, everyone.
Happy Pride, everybody. And thank you again. Diabetech on all platforms, YouTube, go from there, but Instagram, TikTok, and really just an example of the power of sharing your story Justin Tech, Justin Diabetech. Thank you for coming on today, man.
You got it.